Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to Tuesday, the 18th of June. And we've got another beautiful day here on Cape Cod, but it's going to get pretty warm here in the next day or two. And I'm going to be telling you about the weather here in just a moment. But first, I'd like to say, June, please slow down. This final approach to this great weather, well, we want to keep it here with us for quite some time. Well, this is Doug Fagan, your volunteer reader, coming to you today, as always, from the studios of the Audible Local Ledger here in sunny and getting warmer Mashpee, Massachusetts. Now, let's take a look at the weather for the Cape and the South Shore. And for those of you who like to do some ocean swimming, well, that's getting pretty warm out in some of the waters as well, and I think you would enjoy that. Taking a look on the other side of the canal, westerly from the Cape, we have 88 degrees in Plymouth as a high today, and 81 in Buzzards Bay, and 85 in Wareham. Now, when you come across the bridge over the canal, we're going to have, a decline in temperature, but not much. In Sandwich and Barnstable, today we're going to have a high of 82 degrees. In Falmouth, that's 82. Mashpee, 80. Hyannis, 81. Dennis, 82. Moving out to the elbow of the Cape, Chatham, you're going to have a high of 79. Brewster, 84. Eastham, 84. Truro, 83. And out at Race Point Light in Provincetown, it's going to be a high of 82 degrees today. And sunny, partly breezy, but partly sunny as well, but mostly sunshine all day long. Overnight tonight, we're going to have a low of only 67 degrees, which is fine. Now, tomorrow and Thursday are going to be our hottest days. 82 is a high for Wednesday. 83 is a high for Thursday. And still Friday, 82. Saturday, 79. Now, what do we have as a constant all of those days? Sunshine. How nice that is. Mostly sunny, breezy, and mild. Now, it's going to be humid increasingly every day starting tomorrow. So if you've got AC in your house, you might want to turn that on, but try to get outside and enjoy this lovely weather. Taking a look at the water temperatures, Cape Cod Bay today 63 degrees. Waves minimal 1 to 3 feet. Wind direction south-southwest, 8 to 16 knots. Now, if you prefer swimming in the warmer weather, or warmer water, rather, the water temperature at Nantucket Sound is 70 degrees. Not bad at all. Wave heights, again, minimal 1 to 3 feet. Wind direction southwest at 8 to 16 knots. All right, let's travel out to the islands and take a look at Martha's Vineyard, where Oak Bluffs will have a high of 79 today, and Edgartown 78. Again, sunny skies. Going further out to Nantucket, Nantucket Village will have a high of 78, and Secaucet will have a high of 74. So, beautiful, beautiful weather here on Cape Cod and the South Shore, not only for today, but for the entire week. But we have some increasing humidity, as I say, beginning today through Saturday. But lovely. And June, slow down. Let's enjoy this wonderful weather. Well, let's move away from the weather now and take a look at the Tuesday edition, the front page of the June 18th edition of the Cape Cod Times. Before we do that, however, hats off to the Boston Celtics, who won their game in high style last night against the Dallas Mavericks by 20-some points to win their 18th overall NBA Finals championship, one more than the Lakers, and they now hold the record for the most NBA titles. It was a great game, very much dominated by the Celtics, and a little bit more on that in the broadcast later. Well, here on the front page of today's Times is a picture of a tractor in a cranberry bog, or near a cranberry bog, and the driving article here is It says it's a huge economic driver. Kings and queens give boost to 2 Cape cranberry farmers. This is by Denise Coffey of the Cape Cod Times staff, and here is the article. It's been 5 months since David Ross and his son James started renovating 2 cranberry bogs, one in Barnstable and the other in Sandwich. Work at the Barnstable bog is finished. Sandwich is close behind. On June 8th, an excavator was putting down a layer of sand before rootings could be planted in Sandwich. It will take 3 to 4 years to see the payoff in a higher yield and more marketable cranberry crop. Ross takes a long view of the industry he's been in for 41 seasons. He hopes the renovation will make the farm economically viable and thus produce cranberries for another 30 to 50 years, long enough for his son to continue the work. We're survivors, Ross said, but there's been a lot of external pressure and economic pressure, so we've had to adapt. Renovating the bogs is part of Ross's adaptation process, one they've undertaken with the help of the state. David Ross will be reimbursed $42,750, or about one-half of the cost of the work upon its completion, compliments of a state cranberry bog renovation grant. James will get $49,500 after his renovation work is completed. So why do the renovation grants matter? Well, the grant program was just one recommendation that came out in a state cranberry revitalization task force report in the year 2016. The task force was formed to bolster an industry worth $1.431 billion to the state, important to the 2,114 farmers and responsible for 6,908 jobs. Bay State farmers were struggling to keep up with their competitors. The 2016 report suggested grants, low-interest loans, and tax credits. The task force even presented exit strategies aimed at conserving land and preserving the environment as bogs were retired and farmers aged out of the industry. So the Commonwealth's number one crop. Cranberries are the state's leading commercial crop. In 2021, cranberry production, processing, and manufacturing accounted for more than $60 million, according to the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. The total economic impact to the state was close to $1.7 billion, according to Farm Credit East. It's a huge economic driver, Ross said, but the industry is falling behind competitors in Wisconsin and Canada primarily. Massachusetts may be where the cranberry industry started 200 years ago, but the state now produces only 30% of the 400 million pounds of cranberries Americans consume annually. That is according to the Agricultural Marketing Resource Center. Prices for the heirloom varieties grown in Massachusetts, which are the relatively small, irregular size of the bogs, and the difficulty getting and paying for commercial loans are challenges to small family farms that produce most of the state's labor-intensive crop. The grant program is one way the state is helping these farmers. So why renovate the cranberry bogs? Well, most of the state's bogs are in the depressions of old kettle ponds. They have irregular sides and uneven topography. Varieties traditionally grown here, early blacks and howells, for example, are smaller berries compared to hybrids that have been developed by Rutgers University and the Grauelsecki family in Wisconsin. Some hybrids produce 2 to 4 times more barrels per acre than the older varieties of cranberries, and consumer preferences have changed as there is less demand for varieties traditionally grown in Massachusetts. So state grants allow farmers to strip old vines from bogs, laser level the bog, install efficient irrigation systems, redesign the bogs in some cases, and plant new cultivars. This year, the state gave out 22 grants ranging from $35,750 up to $125,000 on bogs ranging from 1.43 to a high of 11 acres. He's already planted some queens at the bog and wants to continue with the same cultivar. His son is replacing early blacks with Crimson Kings in West Barnstable. The Kings were developed by Wisconsin breeder Edward Griskowski. Both varieties promise bigger fruit, higher yield, and more pest and disease resistant are they. Farmers are yield obsessed, Ross said. If we can grow twice as many cranberries on the same ground with the same inputs, that's more profitable for us, obviously. It's important to increase yield to stay profitable and to sustain our bogs for the long run. So not just a benefit to the farmers. Tom Anderson, program manager of the state's Cranberry Bog Renovation Tax Credit Program, said there is a larger purpose beyond helping cranberry farmers. Programs aimed at helping farmers help the state economically and environmentally, he said. The industry's control of significant acreage in southeastern Massachusetts, including bogs and surrounding habitats, is home to birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish who benefit from bog conservation and renovation. And renovations would result in millions of gallons of water conservation annually. Economically speaking, planting high yields disease-resistant cultivars does improve the quality and the quantity of cranberries. Farmers' incomes and the economic benefits to the state improve as a result, said Anderson. By laser leveling bogs, less water is needed to cover cranberries for harvesting. More efficient irrigation systems allow for less water usage overall, which is especially important for southeastern Massachusetts, Anderson said. And monitoring systems can target specific bog areas that need the most frost protection when temperatures dip low. Renovated bogs require less energy to pump water and less fuel to power the equipment that harvests the berries. At David Ross's bogs in Barnstable, the contrast between new and old is quite obvious. In the older bog, small trees, shrubs, and grasses have established themselves. The land and its contours are uneven. Not so the newly renovated bog. It is neat, laid out evenly with short, newly planted vines rising up out of a fresh layer of sand. It will take a year for the new vines to establish themselves, Ross said. They'll grow out in the second year and start fruiting in 3 to 4 years. He calls the work of farming appealing. He enjoys working the heavy equipment and growing things. He likened it to gardening on a big scale. It's very satisfying when you grow a crop, he said. It's a big sense of accomplishment. You see, literally, the fruits of your labor. All right, friends, that's the article talking about the renovation of bogs in southeastern Massachusetts and here on the Cape and the economic and environmental benefits that come along with that. All right, let's move on to another article here on page 1. The headline of this next article is $5 million sought to assess design Bourne Bridge repairs. This article is written by Walker Armstrong of the Cape Cod Times Network. And here it is. Lawmakers are asking for $5 million to evaluate critical interim repairs needed for the Bourne Bridge to maintain it while rebuild plans are underway for both the Bourne and the Sagamore bridges. In a joint letter to the Senate Appropriations Committee, U.S. Senator Edward Markey, Democrat, of course, from Massachusetts, and U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, have called for the money in the fiscal year 2025 Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. This funding, the lawmakers said in the letter, is essential for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to undertake the necessary evaluations and design work to prolong the bridge's lifespan while the project to replace both the Sagamore and Bourne bridges moves forward. The money would be used for a detailed evaluation and design to extend the Bourne Bridge operational life while efforts continue to secure full replacement funding, Markey said. For the interim repairs of the Bourne Bridge, well, the $5 million is for interim repairs to avoid a major rehabilitation of the bridge as part of a commitment to replace both the Cape Cod bridges, Markey said in a Wednesday interview with the Times. This funding will enable us to design a project for repairs to the Bourne Bridge, extending its life while the replacement project proceeds. The Bourne and Sagamore bridges, nearly 90 years old, are vital infrastructure links for the region. These aging structures handle the passage of more than 35 million vehicles annually, providing the only vehicular access for over 260,000 residents and 5 million visitors to the Cape each year. Despite their importance, both bridges are outdated and increasingly expensive to maintain, necessitating replacement. The bridges are completely safe, Markey said. We just need this funding to keep the bridges and the Bourne Bridge in a state of excellent repair. Well, as has been reported, the Sagamore Bridge replacement has been prioritized. The two-bridge replacement project is a phased approach, endorsed and proposed by Governor Maura Healey. The immediate project will be the Sagamore Bridge, Markey said. The repairs that we're discussing will make it possible for the Bourne Bridge to continue to be serviceable as the primary pathway on and off the Cape while the Sagamore replacement moves forward. A 2020 major rehabilitation evaluation report by the Army Corps of Engineers recommended replacing both bridges as the most cost-effective solution, cautioning that major rehabilitation without replacement would result in prolonged closures and hefty maintenance costs, thereby limiting access to and from the Cape. In their letter, Markey and Warren expressed gratitude for the $350 million allocated in the fiscal year 2024 Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, part of a broader $600 million commitment from President Biden for the bridge replacements. This is one more example of how we're pursuing every avenue to secure additional funding to replace the Cape Cod bridges, Warren said. Congress should honor President Biden's request, she said, and, quote, I'm pushing as hard as possible to make that happen, end quote. Markey underscored the broader significance of the project, noting, quote, the Cape Cod Bridges project is the exact type of endeavor Congress imagined when we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. We just have to seize this historic opportunity, end quote. All right, the article about the Bourne and Sagamore replacement bridges and the need for updated maintenance on the Bourne Bridge. In search of more local and regional articles, we're now skipping over to page 3, the Cape and Islands page, which typically does have articles of local interest. And this first one says, Cape Cinema in Dennis to reopen after a 5-week closure. This article is by Zane Razak of the Cape Cod Times Network, and here is the article. The 94-year-old Cape Cinema will make its comeback on Friday. The historic Dennis Movie Theater at 35 Hope Lane has been closed for about 5 weeks, with theater officials announcing its indefinite hiatus on April 27 due to financial problems. But thanks to robust financial and moral support from the community, Cape Cinema Incorporated President Eric A. Hart said the nonprofit theater will be able to reopen. He said it's been incredibly positive. The phone's been ringing off the hook. People have already bought tickets for opening weekend, he said. We're very encouraged by the sense of positive vibrations from the community. Hart declined to say how much money had been raised to keep the theater open, calling it, quote, a significant amount of money, end quote. The Times had previously reported Hart had said at a community meeting that the theater could reopen comfortably for the summer season if supporters could raise $100,000. We're still looking for support. We want to be open and stay open and to ensure something like this never happens again, said Hart. So known for the Rockwell-Kent mural, the circa 1930 theater is known for the 6,400 square foot mural on the ceiling illustrated by Rockwell-Kent with representations of the heavens and constellations. The movie theater itself is owned by the Cape Cod Art Center and located on a Route 6A campus along with Cape Playhouse and the Cape Cod Museum of Art. The theater will reopen its doors with a showing of Thelma, a new comedy starring Oscar nominee June Squibb about a 93-year-old woman who gets conned out of $10,000 by a phone scammer. Thelma is a very summer light comedy that everyone can enjoy, said Hart on why he chose to open with that event. The week will also include 3 showings of Exhibition on Screen, My National Gallery, London. All right, good news. The Cape Cinema in Dennis is reopening after the 5-week hiatus and significant money contributions from the community. Staying on page 3, the Cape and Islands page, this next article is entitled Cannabis Control Commission Approves Island Transport for Marijuana by Denise Coffey, the Cape Cod Times staff, and here is the article. The Cannabis Control Commission unanimously approved an administrative order that allows the transport of marijuana to and from marijuana establishments and treatment centers in Dukes and Nantucket County at its June 13 meeting. The order will allow transport of marijuana over state territorial waters and is effective as of midnight June 14. The Commission's original position was that transporting marijuana by air and sea to and from the islands could have violated federal laws. Cannabis is still illegal according to federal guidelines. The order comes after Fine Federal, the only cannabis cultivator on Martha's Vineyard, announced plans to shutter the business in September. It cited economic difficulties as a reason for its closing. Jeff Rose, owner of Island Time Dispensary on Martha's Vineyard, has been closed for about 4 weeks because of supply chain issues. Before the administrative order, marijuana establishments, including Rose's, could only get cannabis product from island suppliers. If there's no relief, I'll go out of business, he said in a phone call before the commission meeting. Commissioners heard from medical marijuana patients, dispensary employees, and owners at a public listening session at Oak Bluffs on June 6. Commissioner Bruce Stebbins called the testimony compelling. He said the administrative order puts a priority on patient access and could expand opportunities in Dukes and Nantucket counties. The order will permit island transportation in response to the growing risk and access to safe and legal medical cannabis in Dukes and Nantucket counties due to lack of access on the island, according to Commissioner Kimberly Roy. At the end of the day, this was about public health and public safety, along with patients and consumers having access to safe product. She said there were 234 registered medical marijuana patients on the island who would have suffered if nothing was done. The order will require marijuana establishments and marijuana treatment centers that choose to transport cannabis product over state territorial waters to have the products tested by independent laboratories, according to General Counsel Christina Gasson. The order is contingent on the creation of a standard operating procedure and inspection of seaworthy vessels, Gasson added. All right, there you have it. Interesting article about marijuana on the island. All right, moving on. Back to page 1. Obviously, the item of abortion is of major interest across the country. This article is entitled Out-of-State Abortion Trips More Than Double. This is from the USA Today Network staff. And here's the article. More than 171,000 patients traveled out of state to receive abortion care in 2023, according to new data from the Guttmacher Institute that underscores the impact of recent state abortion bans. Out-of-state travel for abortion care has more than doubled since 2019, when 73,100 patients traveled across state lines for abortions, according to the Guttmacher Institute's monthly abortion provision study project. The project estimated the number of abortions in each state without a total ban. The project found that over 1 million clinician-provided abortions took place in 2023. Of that figure, 171,300 were performed on people who traveled out of state to get them, and often not to a neighboring state either. What's striking about this new data is how often people are traveling across multiple state lines to access abortion care. Isaac Maddow-Zamet, Guttmacher data scientist and project lead, said in his statement, "Traveling for abortion care requires individuals to overcome huge financial and logistical barriers, and our findings show just how far people will travel to obtain the care they want and deserve." The Institute supports abortion rights. The number of patients that travel out of state for abortion care has always been particularly high in states with restrictions, according to the Institute, even before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Historically, however, many of the people traveling from restrictive states went to states that now have total abortion bans, Guttmacher said in a news release. For instance, in 2020, more than 800 Louisiana residents traveled to Texas for abortion care. That is no longer possible, as Texas bans abortions in nearly all cases. Instead, the Institute said in 2023, more than 3,500 Louisianans traveled across multiple states to get care in places like Florida, Illinois, and Georgia. Data showed that most patients in states with strict policies traveled to the nearest or neighboring state that allowed abortions. But patients in southern states, which have the most restrictive laws compared to the rest of the country, had to travel across multiple state lines to receive appropriate care. The state that had the most patients leave for abortion care was Texas, according to the data. A majority of those patients, more than 14,000, traveled to New Mexico, but thousands of others crossed several state lines for the procedure. The state that received the most patients for abortion care was Illinois, with about 37,300 patients from 16 states, according to the data. Kelly Baden, Vice President for Public Policy at the Guttmacher Institute, noted that Florida had a significant role last year in maintaining some level of abortion access in the Southeast. More than 85,000 abortions occurred in Florida in 2023. But that figure is expected to drop because of a state law that prohibits virtually all abortions after 6 weeks, which took effect in May. Currently, the closest state that provides abortion care after 6 weeks of pregnancy is North Carolina, so said the Institute. All right, let's move on from page 1. Well, friends, we are nearly to the halfway point of today's broadcast of the Cape Cod Times Tuesday edition for June 18th. And for those of you who follow us regularly know that it's now that we typically turn to the obituaries, so let's do that. Our first obituary today is that of Paul Roger Crevier. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. It looks French. It's Crevier. Paul Crevier, with the date line of St. Augustine. Paul R. Crevier, 76, passed away on June 10th in St. Augustine, Florida, with family by his side. Paul was born on Flag Day 1947 in Hartford, Connecticut. Paul loved to be near the ocean and moved his young family from Connecticut to Cape Cod, where he kept several boats, one of which he built by himself. where also he fished and even had his own lobster traps for a time. His last career was being the sole proprietor of a successful pest extermination business. He was friendly and outgoing and had a following of devoted clients. He was a proud member of Universal Lodge AF and A&M in Orleans, Mass. Before retirement, he and his wife escaped northern winters to go to Florida to enjoy sunshine and fishing. In retirement, he hung up his snow shovel for good and relocated south, first outside Savannah, Georgia, and then settling in St. Augustine, Florida in 2016. Paul was an accomplished home cook, regularly sharing recipes with family and friends, and planting his favorite ingredients in the extensive gardens he and his wife maintained. Paul is survived by his wife of 57 years, Martha Ann Crevier, 2 daughters, and numerous grandchildren. A memorial service will be held at a later date. Memorial donations may be made to the American Cancer Society. All right, we have another obituary, and that is of a Marvin Miller, Dateline of Plymouth. Marvin Miller of Plymouth, formerly of Mashpee, passed away peacefully on June 16 at the age of 84, surrounded by family. Marvin will be remembered as a remarkable man and the patriarch of our family, always ready to listen and offer his wisdom. He was a testament to the idea that true wealth lies in family connections and shared joy. His life was an example of hard work, dedication, and a commitment to making a difference in the lives of his family and everyone fortunate enough to have known him. He leaves behind his wife of 60 years, Millie, 2 children, and numerous grandchildren. A visitation will be held at Chapman Funerals and Cremations, 74 Algonquin Avenue, which is Route 151, in Mashpee this Thursday, June 20, from 11 to 12 noon, 11 a.m. to 12 noon. A funeral service will follow at noon. Burial will follow at the Falmouth Jewish Cemetery in Falmouth. In lieu of flowers, donations in Marvin's honor may be made to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, 501 St. Jude Place in Memphis, Tennessee. That, friends, was the obituary of Marvin Miller, formerly of Mashpee, now of Plymouth. All right. Are you interested in the lottery results? I imagine you are. So let's take a look at those right now. See what we have. In the Mega Millions, we'll talk first about the pots and how much is in them for the various big drawings. Mega Millions will have a drawing today at 11 o'clock tonight. That current jackpot is worth $61 million. Powerball, which will be drawn tomorrow at 11 o'clock, has a jackpot of $56 million. And the Mega Bucks has a jackpot of $900,000. That drawing will be tomorrow at 9 p.m. All right, let's take a look at some of the recently drawn numbers, starting with yesterday's number game. The midday drawing numbers for Monday, June 17th, were these: 2871. Midday numbers 2871. The evening drawing for the numbers game were these: 7487. 7487 evening numbers. Mass cash, again, yesterday, June 17. 10, 11, 19, 30, and 32. Mass cash, 10, 11, 19, 30, and 32. Powerball, drawn yesterday, the 17th of June. Here are those numbers: 30, 48, 53, 58, 66, and a Powerball of 9. 30, 48, 53, 58, 66, Powerball 9. Mega Millions, drawn last Friday, were these numbers: 1, 25, 26, 31, 65, with a Mega Ball of 2. Again, Mega Millions from last Friday: 1, 25, 26, 31, 65, Mega Ball 2. And Mega Bucks, drawn yesterday, the 17th of June. Here are those 6 numbers: 4-18-22, 26, 29, 31. 4-18-22, 26, 29, 31 for the megabucks. And finally, Lucky for Life, also drawn yesterday on Monday, 15, 26, 32, 38, and 46 with a Lucky for Life ball 3. 15, 26, 32, 38, 46, Lucky for Life ball 3. All right, there you have it, friends, the most recent numbers drawn in the various lotteries. So I say to you, as I always do, for those of you who play, good luck, players. All right, for the remainder, we'll probably look at articles of national interest. And this first one says, Congress argues, shocker, as the clock ticks, culture war clashes, risk stalling must-pass bills. Again, this is from the USA Today Network. Here's the article. Dateline, Washington, D.C. America's elected leaders are again headed toward a standoff on some of the most fundamental pieces of legislation they're required to pass every year. If, for example, keeping the government operating and protecting the country from its enemies. And the culture war is at the center of the turmoil. The Republican-led House is challenging the Democrat-run Senate by stuffing controversial provisions into the two most essential measures for the current Congress, which is a little more than 6 months from ending. The U.S. House passed its annual Pentagon policy bill on June 14th, the National Defense Authorization Act, and the bill is a traditional bipartisan endeavor to greenlight hundreds of billions of dollars for the Defense Department. But GOP lawmakers packed the legislation with culture war amendments targeting transgender health care, diversity programs, and climate change. All those provisions are dead on arrival in the Democrat-controlled Senate. Almost the same exact thing happened in last year's version of the act. That series of Republican-sponsored amendments got yanked out of the final compromise product that President Joe Biden ultimately signed into law in December. It's a waste of time, Representative Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, told USA Today. He's the top Democrat on the House Rules Committee, which is the panel that determines which amendments could potentially be tacked onto bills. He accused Republicans of not being serious legislators. House Republicans made a similar move earlier this month when the lower chamber passed one of the 12 spending bills needed to fund the government. The funding bill for military construction and Veterans Affairs passed along mostly party lines as Democrats decried the legislation for including numerous provisions that target abortion, diversity programs, transgender health, among others. Last year, Republicans did not secure most of the provisions they attached to the defense and spending bills. The House's most conservative members relentlessly criticized House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, and accused leadership of ceding ground to Democrats. I hope the Speaker, when the bill comes back from the Senate, will drive a harder bargain than last year, said Representative Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, who's a member of the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus. Representative Kevin Hern, Republican from Oklahoma, said that the GOP-led amendments are very much part of the negotiation process in anticipation of an eventual compromise with their Democratic counterparts on the other end of Capitol Hill. We don't need to go worry about what the Senate's doing. We're a different body, Hern said. Asked if he had any confidence there could be a different outcome in 2024 with Republicans able to secure some of those provisions in the final product, Hern responded without hesitation, no. So, what is the impact on re-election? The partisan fighting has taken a toll on some lawmakers as well. Representative Gabe Vasquez, Democrat from New Mexico, one of the most vulnerable members in the 2024 election, voted for last year's National Defense Authorization Act grudgingly. Despite the tacked-on culture war policies, he voted against the bill last week, saying he was taking a stance. This is all just a meaningless exercise, the same way that it was last year in trying to inject partisan politics, toxic politics, into the American discourse, said Vasquez. The chair of the House Democratic campaign arm, Representative Susan DelBene, a Democrat from Washington, has vowed that her party will go after Republicans on the campaign trail for supporting the controversial policy provisions. The House is pushing through the must-pass bills in a more timely manner compared to last year, and with an eye toward beating the September 30th end of fiscal year deadline for funding the government. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, the Republican from Louisiana, laid out an ambitious schedule last month that would see the lower chamber pass all the spending bills and the National Defense Authorization Act by August. The House is currently keeping pace with Scalise's timetable, but the more controversial bills have yet to be considered by the body. In the Senate's court, the Senate just finished a week with meetings to consider how it wants to tackle the National Defense Authorization Act. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, said on the Senate floor that the Chamber's Armed Services Committee will consider hundreds of amendments. But one essential question hangs over both the NDAA and the appropriations process to come. That is Congress ready to fulfill our most fundamental responsibility of adequately funding for the common defense, he asked. McConnell argued that the White House's budget proposal would effectively cut spending on national defense. He also took issue with Senate Democrats for insisting on the same top-line spending levels to cover both defense and non-defense portions of the federal government, meaning the identical overall funding for the Pentagon and all the U.S. programs that range from transportation to housing, education, and more. The Senate version of the defense bill would increase Pentagon spending by $25 billion, a higher overall figure that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, said Friday reflects the bipartisan support to ensure robust funding for our national security. Schumer also added that the funding increase must be met with an equal increase in spending on programs that serve everyday Americans, citing a bipartisan agreement that struck last year between Biden and then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to raise the nation's debt limit in exchange for funding cuts. For the moment, there's no sign the Senate will grapple with the same cultural war challenges as the House. Senator Kevin Cramer, Republican from North Dakota, said he's not worried that the House GOP policy add-ons will doom the bill in the Senate, and expressed confidence that the differences will be worked out. That's why there's two chambers and why our founders thought to have that type of diversity of thought, he said. At the end of the day, we would always like to come together on the NDAA. All right, that's the end of that article. Well, with the election coming up a few months from now, you're always going to see and hear articles of attack or promotion from each side. This article says Biden attacks Trump as a convicted criminal in an ad. It's by the USA Today Network. It's a Dateline, Washington, D.C. Here it is. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign is escalating attacks against Donald Trump over the former president's recent guilty verdict and other legal troubles, launching a new television ad Monday as part of a massive $50 million paid media campaign that slams Trump as a convicted criminal. The 30-second spot, which will air in battleground states and on national cable television, marks the Biden campaign's first ad that tries to seize on Trump's conviction on 34 felony counts in his New York criminal hush money trial last month. In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud, a narrator says in the ad, which shows clips of Trump in court. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working. The ad touts Biden's effort to lower health care costs and make big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for you and your family, the ad concludes. The ad's rollout comes 10 days before the first presidential debate of the 2024 campaign, set for June 27 on CNN. By hitting Trump over his conviction, the Biden campaign risks inviting attacks from Republican critics who argue Trump's prosecution was motivated by politics and the 2024 election. Crooked Joe Biden and the Democrats weaponized the justice system against President Trump, and this new ad once again proves the sham trial was always meant to be election interference, but Americans see through it, Trump campaign spokesman Caroline Leavitt said in a statement. The ad shows the Biden campaign plans to remind Americans of Trump's conviction even after Biden's son Hunter was found guilty on 3 felony gun counts last week. Character matters, Biden campaign communications director Michael Tyler said in a statement, and the President of the United States should be someone who understands that the highest office in the land is about you and your family, not a vehicle to enrich yourself. That is the ethos Joe Biden puts into the job every day. Trump was convicted of falsifying business records, and his sentencing date is July 11. Moving on to our next article, tomorrow, June 19th, is Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom, which will be, as I said, tomorrow. There's an article about that from the USA Today network. 3 years after it was made a federal holiday, Juneteenth 2024 celebrates the day that the last African-American slaves were told they had been freed. Some historians say that Juneteenth is a day of celebration as well as a day of education. Tim Goller, a professor of urban affairs and sociology courses and director of research for the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University, told USA Today that Juneteenth, or Freedom Day, is a day that shows the beauty of our culture that everyone should participate in. Juneteenth marks the day the last African-American slaves were notified that they had been freed from their enslavers, according to the National Museum of African-American History and Culture. It commemorates the end of slavery in the United States, Goller said. The origins of Juneteenth really date back to June 19, 1865, when the Union Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and he announced the end of the Civil War and the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. This delay and the enforcement of the emancipation in Texas was due to a lack of enforcement until this general arrived, Goller said. Then Juneteenth thus became this kind of powerful symbol of freedom and the long struggle for civil rights for African Americans. Alan Singer is a professor of teaching, learning, and technology at Hofstra University and a historian who writes about the history of slavery and racism. Singer said that during this time, an estimated 250,000 people were kept enslaved in Texas, despite the Emancipation Proclamation, an executive order that was issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1 of 1863. It took over 2 years for all slaves to get the news that they were officially free. Juneteenth is a combination of that month and day, June 19. The Juneteenth National Independence Day Act was passed by the U.S. House and Senate in June of 2021. The bill was signed by President Biden on June 17th of 2021, which officially made the day a federal holiday. Goller adds that Juneteenth has been recognized for years within the black community. Many black people and black communities around the country have celebrated Juneteenth. It's just becoming a much wider and much more visible day now, he said. Since Juneteenth has been declared a federal holiday, many retailers have unveiled Juneteenth products, including clothing, footwear, hats, and other merchandise. The question is, who benefits from all the commercialization of Juneteenth? I'd definitely like to see more African Americans and more black businesses benefit, Kohler said. The trend of commercialization, the risk we run is overshadowing of the historical context and the outgoing struggle for racial equality that Juneteenth represents. Singer hopes that companies selling Juneteenth products are also advocating for more inclusivity. What we need to do is use a day like Juneteenth as a launching pad to build a more just society, he said. Kohler hopes the holiday will bring people together as well as raise awareness about this important day in black history. I think as we observe Juneteenth, it's important to focus on the education, re-election, the continuing and enduring fight for freedom and justice, he said. All right, there you have it. Juneteenth is coming up tomorrow, and that article references it. Here's what might be an interesting article about food and disease. It's entitled Cucumber-Linked Reports of Salmonella Are Still Growing. Again, this is from the USA Today Network. Here's the article. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration continue to investigate 2 salmonella outbreaks likely connected to cucumbers, as the total of those sickened has grown to more than 380 people in at least 28 states. Cases in the first reported outbreak have risen to 196 in 28 states and Washington, D.C., up from 162 people in 25 states. The Center for Disease Control said that 68 of those sickened with the strain Salmonella africana have been hospitalized. No deaths have been reported, and most of the cases occurred in the South, Northeast, and Midwest. Those cases were reported between March 30 and May 23rd, the CDC says. Nearly 3/4 of the 85 patients interviewed said they ate cucumbers. The number of people infected with the strain Salmonella bradyrup is the second outbreak, has risen to 185 in 24 states. On May 31, Fresh Start Product Sales Incorporated of Delray, Florida, recalled cucumbers grown in Florida and shipped to 14 states between May 17 and 21. That recall came after some cucumbers tested positive for a third strain, Salmonella barilli, that's Bareilly, Bareilly, which doesn't match any of the current reported outbreaks, the FDA said. The Food and Drug Administration and the Center for Disease Control are continuing to investigate these outbreaks and the specific sources and products involved. However, with so many people who develop salmonella infections having reported eating cucumbers, it's likely the Fresh Start cucumbers are involved, Bill Marler, a food safety lawyer, told USA Today. The epidemiological investigation after the Fresh Start cucumbers were recalled led to cucumbers in that company. Just because the leftover cucumbers, which were those tested, are clearly the ones people didn't eat, have a different strain, doesn't mean the CDC and FDA are wrong about having Fresh Start issue the recall. He said, most of the time there's never food to test because people have eaten the evidence. So, if you're a cucumber eater, you may want to refrain from indulging in cucumbers, at least until some more information comes out about this potential salmonella outbreak in numerous states, including the Northeast. All right, we're headed toward the end of today's broadcast, so how about we finish up with some really positive things about your Boston Celtics. Here's an article. It features the Celtics players and owners and fans holding up the trophy and that they won last night over the Mavs. And the article is entitled Alone at the Top. Celtics capture record 18th NBA championship behind Tatum and Brown. From the USA Today, obviously a dateline of Boston. Here's the article. 16 years ago to the date, from winning their 17th NBA championship, the Boston Celtics won their 18th, most in NBA history. The Celtics defeated Dallas 106-88 in Game 5 on Monday, yesterday, putting the finishing touches on the portrait of a champion. Boston had the best regular season record, which was 64 wins, 18 losses, and rolled through the playoffs with a 16-3 record, never needing more than 5 games to win any series. The Celtics stand atop this season and stand atop the NBA in all-time titles won, breaking a tie with the Los Angeles Lakers for the most championships. Boston had the number 1 offense, the number 2 defense, and the best three-point shooting team during the regular season, and that certainly carried over into the playoffs, including the finals, especially in Game 5. They scored 67 points in the first half, holding Dallas to fewer than 100 points on 44.9% shooting for the 4th time in the series, and overwhelmed Dallas with three-point shooting. Boston was 12 for 23 on threes at one point in the third quarter. The Celtics led 78-52 with 9 minutes and 10 seconds left in the third quarter, and the remainder of the game was a celebration for Boston fans, as the Mavs were never going to be able to catch up. Jason Tatum led the Celtics with 31 points, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds. And Jaylen Brown had 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. 4 Celtics starters scored in double figures. Drew Holiday had 15 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. And Derek White had 14 points and 8 rebounds to go along with a chipped tooth suffered when his face was smashed into the floor as he chased a ball. Luka Doncic had 28 points for the 12 for 25 shooting, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists for the Mavs, but was only 2 for 9 on three-pointers. And Kyrie Irving's house of horrors at the Garden continued. He was 5 for 16 from the field, 3 for 9 on threes, and had just 15 points. Credit Boston's versatile defenders for making scoring difficult for both Doncic and Irving. And we'll finish with another article about the Celtics. It says Celtics record title is all about team. The Boston Celtics' 18th NBA championship in the 2023-24 season is defined by team. This title was a team effort, especially from the unmatched starting five and capable bench that throughout the playoffs, Celtics coach Joe Mazzulla and players reinforced the idea of team. Boston's championship-clinching 106-88 victory against the Dallas Mavs in Game 5 Monday was a microcosm of that teamwork. Horford and Drew Holiday... let me start it there. From the 2 starting Jays, NBA Finals MVP Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, to veterans Al Horford and Drew Holiday, to Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis, to Sam Hauser to Peyton Pritchard. The Celtics had too much offense and too much defense for the Mavs. Brown had 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. Tatum had 31 points, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds. Hauser made 2 big three-pointers, and for the second time in the series, Pritchard hit a 3-point buzzer beater from half court as a quarter ended. Porzingis, despite playing with a left leg injury, provided valuable minutes. The most important thing for guys like Sam and Peyton is having an understanding that we would not be here without those guys, Celtics coach Joe Mazzulla said earlier in the series. They have literally won games for us, and you're not defined by scoring. That's one of the strengths of this team, top to bottom. Whether it's the starters, role guys, not one guy strives to be defined by one thing. The Celtics had successful teams in previous series and seasons, reaching the NBA Finals in 2022 and the Eastern Conference Finals in 2023, 22, 2018, and 17. But Tatum and Brown weren't ready to win titles then, and it wasn't the right combination of players. Celtics president of basketball operations, Brad Stevens, took over for Danny Ainge, tinkering with the roster, adding White, Porzingis, Holiday, and bringing back Horford. At the right time, with the right combination of players, the Celtics are NBA champions again and could, with this core group, begin what might be hoped to be a dynasty. So congratulations, Boston Celtics, NBA champions. All right, friends, that does it for today's broadcast of the June 18th. Slow down, June. Let's enjoy this weather. Cape Cod Times. This is Doug Fagan, your volunteer reader, saying goodbye for now. Thank you for the pleasure of your time. I've enjoyed reading for you, and we'll look forward to doing so again next week. Enjoy your day. Enjoy the week. Stay healthy. So long for now.